it. So hopefully you had a moment to introduce yourself to your neighbor if you haven't, if you don't know them. Think about for a minute, what does reading mean to you? Let's activate some schema. What does reading mean to your students, to the students in your program? And what reading skills did you teach or practice with your classes last quarter? Oh, look at that. That's okay. That'll keep forcing me to turn back and not give my back to the people. So welcome if you're online, and welcome if you're in person. Please interrupt me. I know this is awkward with I can't move and I've got a microphone, and I can't even really turn and look too much in every direction or I lose my face forward. But it's the end of the day, and I don't know about you, but I started at 8. And so it's exhausting, right? And so we're going to need some energy in the room. I'm hoping the energy comes from your questions. And I'm hoping that the energy comes from your interest in the subject. So this is, if you're in the right room, because I was in the wrong room twice. So I thought it'd be good to start and say, this is a session that you're in. Nobody will judge you harshly if you're like, oh my goodness, I thought this was something else. But it is designed for everyone. I had put in a Whova app early, who was coming. And so I know a lot of you are administrators. And we've got some teachers, and I think there was even a student who was registered to come. And so this sort of fits everyone because I'm coming with a lot of questions. And when we leave, I'm hoping that I've inspired you enough to reach out to me to talk about how I can help you. So, anyone ever heard of the STAR program? Oh, good. So the STAR program, sorry, there's a question, is Student Achievement in Reading. It's a professional development, was in North Carolina. It was national because it came out of a federal grant. I got sent to that. Give you a little bit of my background. I was an ESL teacher. And then the class I was teaching in ESL got moved into adult basic ed. And so I suddenly was an adult basic ed teacher. And they thought, well, maybe we should teach her something to do with reading. And the STAR program is a reading program. And so the state of North Carolina, required me to do this STAR program. Now, my background is teaching, unlike a lot of my peers at the community college, where I taught for 2 decades. So I'm here today as a researcher, but I only come to you as a researcher after 2+ decades. Let's not say how much plus. But a teacher for a really long time. And so they put me in this STAR program. I knew a lot of it from my early education courses, but I hadn't thought about it in a long time. And honestly, it is what started my journey to where I am now, unbeknownst to me at the time. My passion at this point is reading education, and in particular, low literacy reading education. I'm back in grad school because as a teacher, I couldn't find the evidence-based resources to use with my students. And I talk a lot about my students. I had students as a teacher, but I have students now in my study as well. I often tease that if they want to give me a PhD when I'm done, that would be cool. But I didn't ever really care about getting a PhD, and I never wanted to be a researcher. So I consider what I'm doing now my sacrifice for my profession because I knew I didn't have the resources. I didn't know where to find the resources to help my most struggling readers. I am curious in the chat for those of you online, and not through Mentimeter, just verbally, if you will call out, I'll repeat it for the people online. What are you hoping to get from this session? Before I tell you what I have planned, because I will alter it. I'm a teacher. I can change on a dime. And so tell me why you're here. What are you hoping to get? Mhm.
Well, I'm a math major.
Yes, I do.
I'm a math major, but I believe with all my heart that if you can read, you can learn anything. And if you can't read, you are up the proverbial creek with absolutely no paddle. So I want my students to be able to read better because they have a lot to learn.
Amen. Maybe else like to share?
So I'm in a GED option program for 18 to 21-year-old emergent multilingual students, and we are finding we have all 4 tests in Spanish now for GED, but we have students coming to us with no literacy in Spanish. And so we need that, and we don't use CASAS or anything. We're housed within a K-12 school system, but we're gonna have to start an English literacy class and a Spanish literacy class because they don't have the foundational skills. And here's my beef with a lot of, and what I'm hoping to get today, with a lot of reading. I've done Morton Gillingham, Wilson, blah, 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 blah. They will say in their manual, this is fitting for older students and or emergent multilingual students. And really what they mean is are some cognates. And I'm looking to go deeper.
Thanks. I'm an ELL teacher and I'm at the low beginning level. And I taught K-12 world for elementary school for a long time and whatnot. But anyways, most of my students that are zeros is, what they're low beginners. Their biggest issue is their fluency. And this is just as a K-12, an elementary school teacher, I could tell right away, it's fluency. They know how to read, they know the vocabulary, they know all the other things, but they cannot get through the test in a timely manner to make the level gain and to show their growth that they have made over the years. And many of mine also come from countries that never had education for boys and girls, but especially girls. And so I am their very first teacher that they've ever had. So all of the components that you showed on your last graph are things that I do incorporate, but I want more. I want to do even more for them. And I want to look at the research, because I'm a researcher too, to see what is the best options for them to make this growth.
Okay, and I will
And I
tell
see
you
that-
that later.
Yeah, and I'm seeing the effects already.
Anybody else want to share before we dive in?
And a report from
Oh. Yes.
Okay, so Kylie says in the chat, people are interested in building fluency strategies and finding materials for adults that keeps their interest.
Love it. Love it. Okay. Now I don't have the solutions for everything, but we are going to look at, whoops, sorry, didn't mean to do that. We are going to look at the role of fluency in reading, the physiology of reading in the brain, a cognitive theory behind reading fluency. And I'm not a professor, so I promise this will be more enjoyable than it sounds in the title. But look at my current study that I'm doing with reading fluency, which involves the HELPS intervention. Anyone familiar with the HELPS intervention? It's a K-12 intervention. You will be by the time you leave. The participants in my study, and then really what I want to get to mostly is the what's next. How can you take this information and make it useful? Nobody is selling anything. You can't even buy the HELPS intervention if you tried. I'm not selling it, but I am trying to find evidence-based. I'm trying to create evidence-based interventions. And so it's about studying how these things work. So you'll see as we go. So let's actually start by getting into the heads of some of our most struggling readers, because we all can read. I'm assuming, I'm going to make the assumption that we're all able to read in this room. And so we know that it takes phonemic awareness, plus decoding, and then you can read a word, right? And it's been a long time, I would imagine, since you struggled to read a word. So if you're online, this is a good one for you. I want you to make sure you're mute, and I want everybody in the room to sound out the words individually. Don't worry about the person next to you. Just go with your own sound. So I show you this, and what sound do you make? By the way, I will answer no questions right now. And don't write anything down. So.
Yeah.
Now, without saying what it is, so that we don't ruin it for everybody else, if you think you know what that word was, raise your hand. All right. So a couple people. So what we just did is we sounded out letter by letter, phonics. You had to know the sounds. That's painful, isn't it? And it isn't a very effective way to read because I even heard some people starting to recognize, well, what sound does C make? Because it makes two sounds. And so usually when we read in morphemes or word parts. And so let's try that one.
Yeah.
You are on top of it. Typically, we usually have to go a little bit faster than what we just did because it's a long word. And so by the time a true struggling reader got to X, they forgot the cow. And so fluency is about making it through that word initially fast enough to remember the beginning. Now, I suspect many of you know the word calisthenics, although we don't use it very much anymore. And this is put into your brain. It's in your virtual word form area. That's what physiologists are calling it now, as a whole word. And so if I had just shown you this, you would have responded really quickly and you would not have had to sound it out. But most of our students, even our higher level ones, aren't going to know calisthenics. And so they're going to have to sound it out. And what we see with the lower literacy students is that they sound that first part out and then they guess. And so, oh, it must be calendar. Because calendar is a word I use all the time and it starts with cal. And so they don't carry it through to the end. They misguess the words. If they're only reading silently, you don't even know they've misguessed the words. And then when you ask them a comprehension question, they get it wrong. And so we know that we need to teach students to do this more fluently because we know fluency and vocabulary. So if you don't know what the word calisthenics means, we still have a problem. It takes fluency and vocabulary together to be able to come to comprehension. And you can keep giving out those comprehension worksheets over and over and over again. They're not going to ever get better if they're missing those foundational skills. And that is what I saw. And because I got more aware of it, I kept getting put lower and lower and lower. So I started out at a very high ABE level. And then they saw that I was testing students with the STAR training, has an assessment process. And I was assessing and I was going, oh, the problem here is fluency. Okay, I'll work on fluency with my students. Always, everybody needs vocabulary. But because I kept getting back to those foundational skills, the bosses would say, oh, well, she'd be really good with lower level and lower level and lower level. Until I was with people at a level where they didn't know the letters because they had never been to school in their country. And I really hit a wall. And that is ultimately what brought me back to school because there was no ventures for early literacy levels. And so we all know if you've taught ESL or you're an administrator, you know the venture system. You can take someone, as the last session said, right out of Walmart, and you can train them to follow the venture system straight through. It tells you what to teach, when to teach it, and it's sequenced. There are lots of things like that for ESL. There's not as many for ABE, and there's certainly nothing for the lowest level ABE students. And so that's how I got where I got. So let's look at a little bit of the research. We know for so long people have argued these reading wars have gone on for decades, right? Whole language, or should we do phonics? How many people think whole language is better? How about phonics is better? Okay, so we've definitely swung back around, right? Because we went in the 80s and the 90s, it was all about whole language. But the truth is, the brain research right now is showing it's both. It's both. And so orthography, which we often will call automaticity, the looking at calisthenics and just knowing calisthenics when you see it right away and not having to break it down is often what people use, but it's not the only system. Both of these systems happen in a fraction of a second, and they both happen in your brain. This comes from physiology. And so we've been able to prove that your brain is using both these systems simultaneously. For orthography, we know that you've got to be able to recognize the word automatically, either as a whole word or sometimes as just a few morphemes. You've got to have, I'm looking in both places, I'm getting confused. You've got to have that intact sequential memory. You've got to have intact self-monitoring. You have to have the ability to discriminate sounds. And you need to have the vocabulary because it's almost impossible to recognize a word you do not know in your verbal language skills. On the other side of that is phonology, which, again, we're still focused on the science of reading in both sides, but phonology is where you're decoding that word and encoding it. So you need phonological awareness, that ability to blend the words, to discriminate the words. You still need that sequential memory and intact self-monitoring. I will, by the way, put this slide deck on to Huva tonight or tomorrow. All right, so you'll have the whole thing. Don't worry too much about it. You can always email me and I'll send it to you as well. So this neural connection happens in fractions of a second, and both systems happen. And we know because of neuroplasticity, the ability of your brain to adapt, if one system isn't working well for some reason, the other system will sort of take over. But again, you're not going to get to orthography if you don't already have those words in your language system. So we do have to teach sight words. English is the most opaque, one of the most opaque languages, really hard language to learn. It's not obvious. The sounds don't work. And so you've got to teach some sight words. You've got to teach phonics. This, by the way, is called the dual root cascade model. Comes to us from cognitive science and has been backed up by physiological science. I'm really obsessed right now with physiological science, how the brain really works. It's one of the benefits of going back to grad school. I went to school, we didn't have a way to even know what your brain was doing. I always tease the students and say, when I did research, we carried a thumb drive around the campus, or we found the reader, the microfiche reader. If you're young, you don't even know what I'm talking about. But research today is much, much easier and much more accessible for people. So you probably have heard about the simple view of reading. This is much more common. It's purely cognitive. And essentially, it's saying that we go from word recognition to language comprehension to reading comprehension. And how do we get to that word recognition? By the way, this is credited to Gao and Tumner in 1986. This is not new. Phonemic awareness and phonics together work with vocabulary and comprehension, but fluency is the key part of that. And so without that fluency, and when we say fluency, what we mean is, sorry, you can't see it now, but it's the rate, the accuracy, and that's prosody expression. And so when we're talking about fluency, that's what we're talking about. How fast are you reading? How accurately are you reading? Are you going from calisthenics to calendar? And then are you able to show expression or prosody when you read? If you can do those three things pretty well, then comprehension is accessible for you. But if you can't do those things, comprehension is not accessible. And we know from a lot of researchers, including some that are with us this week, that reading fluency is a huge issue with adult learners. And so that's what I'm studying. I am doing a case study evaluation of helping early literacy with practice strategies. It's called HELPS. And it is a thoroughly researched strategy with children, but not with adults. And I'm using it to support adults with low literacy skills. My study is qualitative, but it is just the very first one. The interest has been amazing, actually. I've gotten support from other colleges. There's not a lot of research out there on interventions. And so this has been really exciting. I started using HELPS when I was a teacher. I learned about it. I started doing it with some of my students. Truthfully, I didn't find that their speed improved significantly. Their accuracy did. Their meta-awareness, they're acknowledging that there are some issues and what my issues are. But you know the most exciting thing that happened from doing this? their confidence, their sense of self-efficacy increased. And I'm going to show you why. And while it's not a huge part of this study, it will be in the future, because in the current study, it's been really obvious that that has been a huge impact on the people being tutored. And so I've got 3 research questions, like anybody who's ever done research has done. And yes, I'm speaking quickly, but feel free to interrupt me if you have questions. As measured through standardized reading assessments, as well as interviews and focus groups, what impact does HELPS have on the adult learners' foundational reading development and self-efficacy? So does the intervention work to do what we want it to do? To what extent is it accessible and feasible for adult literacy intervention as perceived by the tutors and the adult learners? So we're looking at whether it's social validity. Do the adult learners accept it? Do they have issues with it? It was a curriculum created for children. The steps have been adapted a little bit for adults, but the curriculum was not. So the passages they're reading are still childlike passages. And so what I'm doing is I've got 9 adult learners, 4 tutors. I'm getting ahead of myself, but I'm meeting with all of them very, very regularly because it's a small study. I can do that. And then finally, as measured through the tutor data collection tools and the qualitative interviews, are there language and vocabulary issues that present obstacles to the learners? I actually expected this more so than I'm finding it. I thought vocabulary would be a bigger issue, and I'll talk about that in a second. I am delivering this, I should say it was created by Dr. John Begany at NC State University. He's not only aware of this, he supervises me. He's my advisor now. So, yes. So this is the current study. I've got 9 adult learners. I started with 11. I excluded 2 because they read at or above a 5th grade level. So I was looking specifically for students who read, adult learners, who read between 3rd and 5th grade. The reality was I had several that were below that. And because we know in K-12, if a child doesn't qualify for an intervention, the school goes and finds another intervention to meet their needs. I also knew that in adult learning situations, that doesn't happen. And so with Dr. Begany's approval, we took anyone below 3rd grade. So I have 2 or 3 that are significantly lower. And you'll see some stats that will point that out in a little bit. They were recruited from 3 adult basic ed colleges. They all read at or below 3rd grade. My tutors are NC State undergrads, which thank you to, oh, here she is. Everybody can see Kylie. Kylie is helping me with the online portion of this. She's one of our tutors. So we've been very lucky to have these amazing tutors. All of the help sessions are delivered on the Zoom platform outside of class time. So that was it didn't need to be a requirement, but that was one of the points in the study is we said, you need to stay enrolled in your adult ed program. It's 3 to 4 30-minute sessions a week. We ask for a commitment of 3. And so this should be in addition to your work. The adult learners are compensated from a sub-grant from Mount Holyoke College. If anybody's looked at research, they know Kathy Binder, who is very prolific and amazing, said, why don't I help you? And I'll give you some support so you can pay your adult learners. So they can make up to $200. They can continue tutoring beyond the money. Beyond the $200, they don't have to stop the tutoring, but just for tax purposes and stuff. The undergrads get college credit for being tutors and study. So the intervention, by the way, I monitor all the tutors. They get coached repeatedly. At minimum, I think it's been 4 times to make sure that they're being faithful to the intervention. They have fidelity. They were also trained not just in the intervention, but they were trained in adult best practices. And because I had some lower level adult learners, they were trained in some decoding best practices and vocabulary best practices. The intervention itself is a 13-step tutoring intervention. These are the steps. It's kind of blurry. You don't really need to see it. Essentially, every session starts with a timed reading. The timed readings come out of a 100-passage curriculum. They always start by reading the passage that they worked on in the prior session so that it can be determined whether or not they should move on or they should work a little bit longer on that session, on that passage. So they will never stay on a passage more than 3 times. They'll get moved on, get socially promoted after 3 because it's deadly to work on the same passage for 3 full sessions. They also do what we call a phrase drill, where it's certain natural chunks of language that they read repeatedly to get more fluent and give them a sense of, we read in chunks. We do not read like this. So with children, we always used to say, don't sound like a robot. We don't read like a robot. With adults, we don't make that connection. We just give them the chunks. They read the chunks and they get to practice either past parts of a sentence that they got incorrect when they did their first time reading, or they might be doing it for just it's less fluent. Particularly lists seem to be difficult for people to read aloud. So it might be that. They also have a modeling part where the tutor reads aloud and the adult learner has to follow along and provide the next word when the tutor stops. And so that's a great strategy, by the way. All of these strategies are independently tested, and those can be used in a regular classroom. Not a bad thing for teachers to just pick up the strategies. When teachers are trained in this for using K-12 classrooms, they often would come back and tell us, well, right, I use those strategies. I'm just not using your curriculum at this point, or I've incorporated and put it into my math problems that people read aloud, or I read it aloud, but I stop and the class has to chorally read the next word. Was that a question? Okay. No, you're fine. So like I said, I did this with my students and with some of my students and found it really exciting. And the thing that gets them the most excited is the graph. So we give every tutor a virtual folder, which is just a fancy Excel spreadsheet with a lot of formulas in it, where we can collect all of our data. And every session, at the end of the session, the tutor goes over the graph with the adult learner. And so online or just shout it out, what does WCPM mean? Words correct per minute. I don't think my online people had enough time to type, sorry. So words correct per minute. So what this graph is, this green line is the goal. So we can see that this learner, and this is a real one from a real student, by the way, they started at 120 words correct per minute as their goal. I think I have, yeah, just trust me. You can see where the green line goes up. That's where the goal got increased. Down here is their words incorrect per minute. And so they're looking at their progress. Each passage is its own little graphic. And so the first time this student read, sorry if you can't see me. First time the student read, they read 125 words correct per minute, and they made 1 mistake. By the end of the session, they read 161 words correct per minute. Now, that's not that exciting when you think that they just spent 30 minutes working on this 150-word passage. But we still celebrate it. We don't tell them that's not exciting. They did make a few more mistakes now because now they're trying to read more quickly. There's also, by the way, a step in the intervention where they're asked what the passage is about. So they don't truly get assessed on that, but we want to constantly remind them, we're doing this for comprehension. This isn't about speed reading. It's not about getting fast. It's about knowing what you read. And so when they come back, they're going to read it again. And so in this case, you can see what's very common is they were at 125 on this passage. By the end of the session, they were at 143. When they came back the next time, they were at 133. And they would go down here and look at that as well. And so as long as their retention read is above their goal, then they're ready to move on. Are there questions about the intervention or the graph? Because that's a hard one to sort of digest. By the way, if you're thinking about your tutors, if you want to do this with tutors, this is all done through the formulas in the virtual folder. So we don't have to worry anymore about doing it by hand. Going. Questions online? Okay, awesome. Because the next thing I'm going to do is ask for your help. And so I'm going to ask that you turn to the person next to you, and I want you to think about, lost my time. Oh yeah, but we're going to take about 5 minutes. And we're going to think about these questions and talk to the person around you, or put it in the chat. Are foundational skills assessed for diagnostic purposes in your program? Do you think the students in your program lack foundational skills? Would the students benefit from structured evidence-based tutoring? And do you already have a tutoring program in place? And then I'll still open it up for advice and requests, and we're going to do that repeatedly. So let's take about 5 minutes, if you don't mind, and do a think, pair, share. So turn to the person next to you, and then we'll report back out.
I just started on
So I mean, it's very
there were things, so then, like a lot of so far. And so I did like I was like here started out of bed yeah, and so I was, you know, we were talking like about favorites. Generally, it's my the right sound, and it's like so fresh. So it's like the most, you know, and then all it's so complicated. So yeah, but
I mean, you know, it's so
yes, well, and so it's really cool to talk to you.
Out loud and I said,
30 seconds. That worked really well. That was so soft. So before I ask y'all what you all had come across or what are your issues, I did want to show the online community said they come from small programs. One of them said they were STAR trained, so they do some individual assessments, but they have no structured tutoring. And so that was their thoughts. And I would like to address that, but I'd like to hear what other people said first.
Dot your eyes.
Any of the questions?
Any questions?
Okay, so my primary job right now is literacy instruction for emergent readers. We just started this program in August, so haven't been doing this for that long. But what we are noticing is my background's in ESL, and we were noticing that students kept testing into the same level despite being in class for lots of hours, and their like conversation was really improving, but somehow they're still getting stuck. And so for a lot of these people, I started using ABC English Diagnostic. I don't know if anyone here uses this, but it's built for like refugee emergent readers for adults. And so I started being able through that to identify like, oh, there's all of these like foundational phonics like skills that they're lacking. And so it's not that they aren't able to learn English, it's just that they can't read. And so then they can't like read to learn. And so yeah, it's been really awesome to watch how this has changed, and we kind of built 4 different levels.
Do you have a curriculum you're using?
I use a combination of ABC English and Journey to Success books, and yeah, just dabble here and there. But some new fly too from online.
Yes,
Yeah.
you fly is great.
UFly was also just suggested. So sharing resources. Like I said, I'm not selling anything. I'm actually going to make sure I get all of these names and go back and look. Over here. What's it?
We were talking, and I'm again looking at the ESL side. I'm looking at my ABE, GED. They're coming in at, they get TAFE and it's a 470. There's a lot missing in a 470, and they want to get through. They want to do that, and I guess I want to make sure that looking at the diagnostic, because we've had PD saying the alphabetics, all that's important. But if I had the actual number to prove that, it's kind of just instinctually we know that they're lacking a way to share that with the teacher. So instead of just jumping into that RLA curriculum, making sure we're hitting the foundation for that.
Thank you. And I'll take your other drinks too. Like that's coming up next.
Right, so I'm not reading coach or anything like that. I work for a community college preparatory academy for adult learners, and I teach a CTE course. The biggest problem that we have with students, adult students coming in for those CTE courses is fluency. So, but then they mask it, because what we notice is that adults do well at hiding. So they try to hide or mask what it is that they're actually dealing with. So it takes a lot for a teacher. You have to really kind of develop a rapport to get them to be transparent about where they are with their reading. So I came here today because I'm trying to figure out, and we use Journey, I think it's Journey to Success. I think some academic teachers use that. but I'm trying to find a way to, help students to tackle that, because I need management to buy into the fact that it can be tackled, and it may not be as costly as they think it may be to get it done, but that's where we sit at. So so they're missing, we don't assess them because we can't even ask them if they have a IEP. And they do lack the foundational skills. A lot of times it's because some of them were in school. For the women got pregnant, came out of school. For the men, nobody, kind of forced them to continue in school. Tutoring does help because I do have colleagues that have that background in lower level reading, and they can coach people up, so it does help. So we've seen increases in TABE scores because they isolated those particular students, but these were the students that weren't afraid to be transparent about where they are, so.
So, being from the K-12 world and elementary and whatnot, the training that you get for the awareness and, reading strategy and all that kind of stuff, that's just sort of the base of who you are as a teacher when you come to adult ed, for me. But so like Ames Web was a resource, a place that I would always go. They have, the K-12 world uses it, but they have all the reading fluency passages and the high frequency words and whatnot. Another resource that I really like is Reading A to Z, because it's a paid subscription. It's like $100-200 a year or something like that. My program pays for it for me. But I can get high frequency word sets out of it. I can get reading passages, closed passages. I can do nonfiction at, whatever grade level they're at with their fluency, second, fifth, whatever. So as for an adult, it's still interesting. It's not like a kiddie book because it's nonfiction, and so it's much more interesting read for them, but it's at their level. And they can show, and then our ABE teacher who deals with this was a former special education teacher in her school. So she uses like Aztec and other online programs for adult ed that do the fluency and the comprehension part of it. And so she resets their goal every week based on how they do. So we use all of these different strategies to sort of figure out what are they missing foundationally, and then I have my aide come into my classroom and pull small groups while I'm teaching the large group, so that we can meet the needs of those students within the classroom. They're only there for 2 hours, and that's how we make it happen.
That is awesome. So there's lots of good stuff happening. What often we find though is we're taking these K-12 programs and we're implementing with adults. Doesn't mean that's bad, but they need to be adapted and they really need to be researched and made to ensure that they're evidence-based. Sorry. Hi. So I want to talk to you a little bit about this particular study and what I did, just so you have a sense of what is possible in terms of research and what you might be interested in having happen at your site. And so with these 9 adult learners, I know this is tiny. I'm going to break it down for you in a little bit, but I wanted you to see the scope of the advanced descriptive testing we did with them. And so they got 9 subtests. First, they were given what's called the DIBELS. It's an oral fluency assessment that is proven, thank you, Kathy Binder, in 2011, to work with adults, even though it is a children's children's assessment. Research was done in 2011 by Dr. Kathy Binder, and she showed it shows for adults. So I use that for my inclusion criteria. They were assessed for reading fluency. And again, like I said, we wanted them 3rd grade or below. You can see a 3rd grade level of speed, by the way. Oh, I got another page. Is 73 to about 96 words correct per minute would be 3rd grade. And so you can see almost all of my students are below. And so that qualified them for either strategic or intensive support. When I also did the Wyatt, I did several subtests of the Wyatt program, as well as the Woodcock-Johnson. And you can see across the board, they're all extremely low, very low. Now, you might not be surprised to see that non-native speakers, these two participants, are not native speakers. So you may not be surprised that their receptive vocabulary, their expressive vocabulary is very, very low. But what about native speakers? Did you expect to see someone whose expressive vocabulary is 3%? Receptive is equally low. So these are people born in the United States, raised in the United States, that are speaking like kindergarten, first, second graders. So we think that they're not listening to us, so we think that they don't care, but we are not often speaking to them in that same level of language, and they don't understand what we're saying. And so we have to be really aware that no accent, they speak beautifully, but the level of language is very, very low. So let's break this down for a minute and look at it from one particular learner. And so this learner happens to be the youngest in our study. She's 25 years old. She's a native English speaker. Her DIBELS or DORF, the oral reading fluency, was 55 words a minute. Remember I said 73 was a common third grader, with 6 mistakes. And so we look for like 3 or less mistakes when we do those assessments. So she needed intensive support. By the way, this young woman told me she graduated high school. Now, I did not go back and check to see if she got a diploma or certificate of attendance. We know the difference there, but I certainly wasn't going to draw her attention to she might not have graduated in the traditional way. Her reading composite, this is from the Wyatt, is extremely low. She's at 0.2%. I can answer any questions about these, but for time's sake, I'm just flying through them. Her receptive vocabulary, very low, 5%. Her oral expression, that's, what words does she use when she speaks? Extremely low. She's at 2% compared to other people her age. And then to triangulate that oral expression and receptive expression, receptive vocabulary, I did the Woodcock-Johnson. And Woodcock-Johnson, she was at 1%. And so we see that she's really struggling. Now, I also got the school to send me her CASAS scores. If you're not familiar with CASAS, it's kind of just like TABE. And this alone, you will understand what I'm trying to say. When her CASAS scores for 2025 were 214, and then probably 70 hours of instruction later, 213, and then 208. And then she bumped all the way up to 216. So a whole year of attendance in the program that her college was offering, and I know those of you who run these programs aren't surprised to note she never passed NRS level 2. And her college, I will say, is so excited to have her in the study because at least she's getting one-on-one online tutoring. I'm also collecting data. We did all those descriptive assessments, but along with that, we also collected pre and post oral fluency data. Now, I'm still underway. And so I've not really gotten into my post testing yet, so I can't give that to you. I'm sorry. But watch, and hopefully it'll get published, and I'll share it with anyone who'd like. I'm collecting their standardized literacy scores, just really so I can point out, they're not showing any effect on the CASAS. We don't expect, and I let all the administrators I work with know, I don't expect this is going to improve their TABE score tomorrow. We know those tests are notoriously bad at measuring this really low level. Tutoring fidelity scores, so I'm going in and I'm coaching and making sure we're sticking to the intervention. We have lots of assessment session data. We also do a bi-weekly focus group with the tutors, both so I can help them with struggles that they might be having, and for me to collect information about, what's the motivation like, what's the attendance like, and in the end, I will do semi-structured interviews with everybody who participates. I could pull a little bit of data because I know we like data. I don't know about you. I love data. And so I wanted to make sure I could give you at least a little bit of data. And so I have our attendance so far. And this is as of April 8th. So it's just a couple days ago. I was working on it over the weekend. Our first learner has actually been in the program since September. She's the only one and that I was able to recruit in September after meeting with about 13 community colleges, might be more. And everybody was really excited and everybody was super supportive. But we know administrators can often be overwhelmed. All I was asking was the opportunity to come present to their adult basic ed classes to recruit participants. That's that and give me their TABE or CASA scores. That's all that the college had to do. But they were still really overwhelmed. And one particular college sent me a very nice note about how important this work is, but they were opening a cafe with their special needs population and they couldn't handle anything else. And I don't argue. I mean, I wasn't asking for anything. But I don't argue because we all know we're doing the best we can do. That's true of the learners. We celebrate everything that the learners do. We are constantly working with them. So my point with the first learner is that she had the longest period of all of them. All the rest are since January. So she also has several weeks of holidays that she didn't meet with her tutor. So her numbers are particularly bad, but even if I look at what's her average weekly, we asked for 3 sessions a week. It still looks like all the students I had when I was teaching. You know, we can set them up, they don't come. So what interests me more is when I get to, 2.92 when I asked you to ask 3. I mean, this 97 and 92, 94. Do you have a lot of people in your programs that have attendance like that? This person I'll tell you, we asked her for 4. She was the last person to sign up. And I said, I'll let you in, but you have to do 4 sessions a week, or I'm not going to get enough to include you in my data collection. And she's been really good at it. And this person asked for more sessions about halfway through. He was getting his 3 a week and said, can I get a 4th a week? And so the tutors are doing their best to make this happen. But I've been really interested in why. Why have I been able to get this kind of attendance when I expected that kind of attendance? I will say that first person, because I love stories of people. When I asked her, why are you in GED? She's been in and out of GED for many years. And I asked her why, and she said, I want a diploma and a ring. So she is working very hard on her diploma and her ring. But she's got health issues and she has family issues. And so it's been a challenge, like all of our students. I haven't post-tested her yet, so I'm not sure where we're at with all that. Is that as blurry as it looks to me? Yeah. Okay, so my preliminary findings. I expect to continue collecting data till like May, late May, early June, perhaps. I will keep providing tutoring as long as my tutors are willing. My adult learners need it. Or I can find other people to recruit to do it. And I've talked to one of the community colleges already about how can we get your adult learner tutoring afterwards. This program takes me about 3 to 4 hours to train someone to do. That's it. It's scripted. It's not hard to implement, and it doesn't require someone with any education background. Because it's scripted, because it's pretty simple, we can train somebody pretty quickly. None of these undergrads, they're all psychology majors. My 4 tutors are all psychology majors with no education background, with no teaching experience, and they're doing absolutely beautifully. And so when I talk to them and I try to figure out why is attendance better than expected, well, it's tutoring. And so the tutors have been really flexible. I hear about it all the time. I did not collect the data, which is, bad me, but I will definitely improve it the next time. Saying every time you reschedule, you need to write it down. They've not been writing it down. Some of them are better than others at doing that. But I know they tell me how often they reschedule. Several of them call the adult learner before. They'll call, I think Kylie calls 30 minutes before for one of her learners. Every single tutoring session. Just don't forget, we're going to meet in 30 minutes. And so that kind of relationship building and that kind of support does, I believe, impact that attendance. The other thing that is when attendance is high, they tend to have higher self-efficacy because they do better. And so we know that their motivation and enthusiasm indicate that their confidence is increasing, and everyone is telling me they're enjoying the experience. I'm telling you, the college students are the biggest surprise. They are having aha moments. I've had one talk to me about maybe she wants to go into adult literacy. Like, I know, right? Can't do it at NC State, but I'm getting her into Georgia State, and other great colleges like Mount Holyoke that have fantastic programs like this. I'm working on getting one at NC State. But nonetheless, the adult learners are having this great experience. They're building a relationship with the tutor, which also could be impacting attendance because now it's a personal responsibility. I've made a commitment to you. The other thing I'll say is my tutors, as part of the scripted process, they have to provide multiple comments that are general and specific praise every session. And they've got to give lots of praise and awareness during that graphing session. So they have to find something good to say. That has a big impact. And people get really excited. And what we find is that sometimes the adult learner says, can I get the passage to work on between the sessions? Certainly. Absolutely. Why not? If I can get you to ask me if you can read. At one point, one of the learners was having her daughter time her. It's like, that might be a little bit much, but if think about it, if you can get them reading, I know some of you put as your biggest obstacle, getting people reading outside of the class. We added a step in here where if, particularly with our second language learners, if they need a practice read before their retention read, that's okay. We want to add that andragogy in here. They can get some decisions. If they're really close to their goal, but not quite at the goal, we'll let them decide. Do you want to work on this passage again and get past your goal, or you want to move on? So wherever we can plug in decision-making for the adult learner, that of course we know is really important. And the final one is language and vocabulary are not posing the significant challenges that we expected. I expected vocabulary to be a big issue. It's been almost non-existent for our native speakers. It is there for our second language learners, but the tutors have done a really good job at how do you do vocabulary quickly? Is it a noun? Do you have a picture? Is it a verb? Can you act it out? All on Zoom. But they've been doing a really good job. I'll collect more information about that when I actually talk to the adult learners so I've heard the tutors say, yeah, they understood it. When I get to talk to the adult learners and say, did you understand when they describe these words? But we are keeping track of what words are being described in every single passage across. So we can also, if we have to create a supplemental tool, we can do that. So before we get to the what's next, I wanted to make sure I had time to say thank you. Thank you to my 4 tutors. They're amazing. Thank you to my 9 adult learners. They're amazing. Dan Logis at the North Carolina Community College System has been really, really helpful. Kathy Binder is funding the work. That's really awesome. But here's my question for you, and we're going to end with this because I'm going to ask you to come tell me, because with each one of you, I hope it's a different answer. And so if you've got some ideas today, that's great. But if this inspires you today, tomorrow, or next week to think about if you're interested in having your students participate in a study through NC State or elsewhere, if you've got a tutoring lab and you want us to come and train your tutors, you can do it online. So like I said, I'm not selling anything. I'm only going to ask any relationship I build like that, you let me collect some data on it. And so I would love to have tutors out there that you find. It's online. So if this was for my online people who said, we have no tutors, would you have more tutors if this was online? If the Senior Citizen Center could have a bank of tutors and we're at the I'm trying to think of something better than old age home, like at the retirement community. Thank you. At the retirement community, if they could just get online and tutor, or even your companies in the area, they could do it at lunchtime if they don't have to drive over to your site. Could you develop a tutoring program? The one-on-one tutoring is really my pitch today. I'm also researching other stuff, but one-on-one tutoring has a really big impact with these particular students. And so, yes, references, because You know, I'm a PhD student, got to show you that lots of references. But here's the slide that I want you to take a picture of. And so even if you don't pull down Alphahuba, or whatever we're going to call it, if you don't pull the slide deck down, then at least you have my contact info. If you're like, Amy, I want to see what that curriculum looks like, or we've got a tutoring lab, but we don't know what to tell them to do. Or can you train some of my teachers and they'll do tutoring at a separate time? I don't have any specific, this is what it should look like, because it needs to look like what works at your site, with your community, with your group. And so I am completely open in the next iterations of this study to adapt.
I have a question. What if you have a big program and you can't afford one-on-one tutoring?
So the question was for the online people, what if you have a really big program and you can't afford one-on-one tutoring?
What's your opinion about that?
Well, I come from Wake Tech Community College. I don't know the numbers, but it's one of the biggest. It is the biggest in North Carolina. It's a very big program. They had a tutoring lab, and their tutoring lab only cost them the one hat that somebody wore in recruiting these people. And so tutoring doesn't have to be expensive. You do have to be able to recruit them. Now, the bigger colleges have the benefit that they're often in more urban areas. And so they have more people to pull from to recruit. But tutors can be volunteers. And it was at Wake Tech. And the problem at Wake Tech that I saw as a teacher there was they were volunteers, and then we didn't really tell them what to do. They came, they were really good with the math. Right? And a lot of students had good success with math. But with reading, they didn't, what do I do with this person? How do I assess? I'm not an educator. I don't know what to do. And so that's where if you can recruit the tutors, and I can certainly brainstorm and help you with that, but you do that locally. And then I'll come in and train them, whether it's part of a study or not. I'd like to be part of a study. Shouldn't say that on a recording, sorry. Definitely part of a study. I'll come in and train them, and we'll give you the curriculum. This is like, we're not selling this. Even in the K-12 program, it was never really sold. So absolutely want to help you with this. This is what I can do right now. I am interested in other studies. And so if you're looking to have something studied, I'm happy to talk to you about it. Remember, I might be a PhD student, but really I'm a teacher who is just trying to make sure that other teachers have evidence-based strategies and programs to use in their classroom. And so with that, I'm going to let you go, but I will stay as long as you want to answer individual questions. But I'll say goodbye and thank you to Kylie and to all of our online participants, and encourage people to reach out to me directly if you've just had enough today and you can't manage another coherent sentence. Understood. Thank you.